I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we'll start right off with our hearing for the nuisance dog. There we go, Mr. Jalbert's here. All right. We have the dog officer here to speak. Come on up and let us know what you have going on with this, and please grab a chair so the microphone's here. And I've been involved in a couple of these already, but I'd like it if you could for the board members that haven't done this, explain the difference between nuisance and dangerous and what we're looking for and why.
Since we've opened the hearing, it's important that the individuals who will be giving testimony be sworn in by the chair.
Okay.
Here's the thing right there.
All right. Let me read through. I'm going to swear on all the people in the hearing. Assume that people are going to testify at the hearing.
Yes, I was.
So anyone that plans to speak during the dog hearing in any way, please come on up front and we will swear you in. Joe, just you two for your complaint.
Michael, did you want to speak? Are you going to speak in behalf at all?
I'm the homeowner, so
So-
I guess I'm gonna have to.
Might as well do it all, and if not needed,
Yep.
so be it.
All right. Swear in all the people, do you solemnly swear and sincerely affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Everybody? All right, thank you. You can take a seat again.
Jessica, will you record their names? Or
So we're gonna be
Sandy, you have their names? You can record their names?
Jenny's,
Signed in or did not?
no, they've not signed in.
Is nobody signed in yet?
No,
Please take a minute to sign in. Sorry
Okay,
about
just-
that. We'll get your names that way. But we start with the animal control officer. As I was going to, at least I had that part
See what I'm
correct.
talking about.
Well, I never, I just read that.
Hmm?
I just read it in my book.
Yeah, I had,
New for you, huh?
yep.
Okay, me too.
We've done the hearings.
Well, this is my first
I don't know
one.
if we sworn people in the previous hearings in the past, but those were both settled reasonably, I think. But
You ready? Want me to wait till they're?
we'll let them sign and sit back down so they can pay attention and hear exactly what's being said.
All right, good evening. My name is Jennifer Ford. I'm the Rutland Regional Animal Control Officer. I cover the town of Barrie. I am just going to kind of give you the overall. The petition and the request for a hearing was requested by Mr. Jalbert. And truthfully, they're your best people to recap the scenario because they do live there. So especially when it's a barking dog complaint, whereas I don't live at the address, so I don't often hear, what they hear. So that's going to be, I think, probably the bulk of the testimony, but I can certainly go over the basics with you. In no way are we suggesting this is a dangerous dog. I know there's a difference, and I printed out that law for you. There is a difference regarding dangerous and nuisance. This dog does not meet that criteria for a dangerous dog, so I'm not asking the board, being the hearing authority in town, to decide between those two matters. We're just looking at a nuisance dog complaint at this point. When I did print out all this information, a lot of the key points in here pertain to a dangerous dog. Once a hearing is called before the board, there are three options: one to deem the dog a nuisance, one to deem the dog dangerous if applicable, and one to dismiss the complaint in its entirety. If a dog is deemed dangerous, most of these things that you're going to read after here, and this is just kind of a blanket thing that I print out for these type of things, but most of those measures to be put in place pertain to a dangerous dog. Nuisance dog is a little bit more subjective as far as what we think we should impose to alleviate the problem. So this complaint stems back from the middle of last year. I've had numerous complaints starting, from what I printed out today, and there were probably previous ones, but without printing out, thousands of complaints. I started back in September being a reasonable time frame, and I've had 7 barking dog complaints, 2 loose dog complaints, Addition to this list, there were 2 additional complaints over the last week or 2 by Mr. Jalbert, which didn't go through dispatch because we knew we were already in the process for this. But the barking is an ongoing problem. The dog has been loose on a couple occasions, but those tend to be few and far between, and it's not intentional when the dog is running loose. But the dog they reside on Barrie, Valley Road, and when the dog is tethered in the front of the house, obviously that's a heavy traffic area. And the dog is a little bit, I think he's crawling out of his skin. He's on a tether in the front of the house, and anything that does go by causes him to get in a little bit of a frenzy. I know he's normally barking at something, but unfortunately there's a lot of somethings there for him to be barking at. He is a very rambunctious dog. He's a year old. He's a very busy breed, or combination of 2 breeds that are very busy. So he's a dog that's kind of looking for a job, and he's decided his job is going to be to protect everybody in the whole world from the squirrel that walked by his house.
No, so he's a year old now,
correct.
but in last September, he was just a baby.
Right, yeah.
He's 6 months,
Yeah.
less than 6
Yeah.
months.
Okay.
I did also include some of the new tethering laws, because there are some new laws that pertain to tethering, being things like the dog can't be out for more than 5 hours tethered in a 24-hour period. There are tethering laws that pertain to inclement weather. I have gone to the home and spoken to Maggie, and we've attempted to work out different things, and oftentimes there'll be a stretch where the barking does alleviate a little bit, and Joe was very good to say, no, it hasn't been a problem recently, but we've really started back up again. So he's not unreasonable in that regard, that he's just calling all the time. There'll be stretches when the dog isn't out front that he does, acknowledge that they're doing a good job at that point.
Where is he when he isn't out front? Is he tethered in the back?
No, he's in the house with me.
Okay.
And you have moved him to the backyard on other occasions, and he does do better in the backyard because he doesn't have so much visibility.
With my housing situation, my landlord, the homeowner, my mother, doesn't want the dog tethered in the backyard, unfortunately.
Let me explain that really quick. I am a homeowner with my wife, her mother, and the dog, is very loud when it's in the backyard, especially with the bedroom being facing the backyard. So she sleeps, she has bipolar, so she sleeps sometimes part of the day, sometimes she doesn't sleep, and the dog just keeps her awake. So we really can't keep it back there most of the time. We try to vary between both sides,
But my mother is incredibly mentally ill and agoraphobic and doesn't leave her house more than once a month for doctor's appointments. So take that into consideration.
The problem is the same issue the homeowners are having with the dog in the backyard, the neighbors are having with the dog in the front yard.
Got it.
So there has to be some kind of balance somewhere in between there. There are some things I have, at one point in time, I visited the home with the MSPCA and addressed some of the concerns we had at that point. The dog didn't have adequate shelter in the front of the house at that point. We talked about the tethering situation and things like that. I think what I would like to see happen is, and I understand the concerns with the backyard, but the dog being tied out front is, I don't see there being, unless there was a no bark collar situation or something like that. I personally would like to see the dog off the tether itself a little bit. I mean, to me, my recommendations would be just a 10 by 10 pen with adequate shelter in that pen, a nice dog house or something because there are times I've been that the dog house hasn't been together and stuff, but they very much put it back together.
Not right now, sir. Not.
But they have, whenever I address something, they do try to rectify the situation. It just seems to kind of return, the problems return. What I would like to see would be, and a bark collar or a no bark collar or anti-bark collar is not out of the realm of possibilities. At one point I was going to attempt to provide them with one of my personal ones, but unfortunately didn't have a working one at my house. But there are different devices they could purchase. There are the citronella collars that emit a spray. There are the ones that give a mild shock, that are humane, that are regulated. So I think what I would like to see personally, my recommendation would be to get the dog in a 10 by 10, normal sized dog pen, get him some adequate housing there, wherever that pen may be, get him some adequate housing there with, access to fresh water, and look into possibly a bark collar or something that's gonna work in that regard.
In my experience with dogs, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that when you refrain a dog from meeting people and you keep it, especially when it's tied up or somehow like in a car, something trapped, they tend to be more violent towards people when they're scared because they're scared of that. And if it's in a pen and has a doghouse to go into, it's more likely to just
chill.
just go away and chill and
Without a
not
doubt,
not
'cause
feel like
they
it's.
do have that outlet. I mean, when a dog is on a tether, or even a dog on a leash, dogs on a leash react very differently than a dog that's loose or a pet. And that's not to say that a dog can't get protective of its pen. It very well may. But I think a bark collar would solve some of that. And the dog, truthfully, is not acting aggressively as much as like, you know, hey, come see me. You should come see me, and you should come see me, and you should come see me, and that squirrel should come see me, and I want to eat that squirrel. And so he's just very vocal, and he's a dog that probably really would like a job to do. And being a young dog of a high drive combination of
Oh,
breeds,
yeah.
he's a little bit crawling out of his skin looking for something to do.
He's,
And the pen could alleviate a little of that too, if he had a little bit more room with some toys or something like that in there to keep him a little bit more engaged.
does the dog have an opportunity to go for walks and so forth and get exercise during the
He's
day?
outside with us, so I spend probably about 5 to 6 hours outside on my property a day. And my dog's outside with me 24, like all of the time that I'm outside. I just, unfortunately, I can't hold him on a leash 24/7 and chase after a 3-year-old as a mother. Some of you, I'm sure you can understand that.
Mhm.
I have to have him in an area where he's safe. He was hit by a car when he broke his run over the winter. Now I'm extremely hesitant with I'm 115 pounds soaking wet. My dog is a big boy. I'm not saying I can't go on walks with him or anything, but to ask me to have a leash on him 24/7 on my property while
No, I was
he's
just curious
outside.
if he had the opportunity to get some exercise, that's all.
Always.
Mhm.
We go on plenty of walks. Him, me, and my son, we go over to 122 where it cuts over to Ocam, the horse trails.
Mhm.
You'll see us out there about maybe once every other week. We go up to the dam once a week. When we go to the park with my son, I try to bring the dog with me. And I actually take offense to you saying that my dog might become aggressive or is aggressive because he barks. A barking dog does not automatically correlate to aggression.
Well, I think the dog officers made that very clear, that she's
Yeah,
concerned.
and I don't think that was the suggestion. I just
Right.
think that dogs that are tied do, when a dog is tied for an excessive amount of time, a lot of times they do develop a frustration level because they want to see that person, they
He
can't
wants
get
to-
to that person.
Wants to be involved.
So that's a frustration level. So a lot of his barking, I think, is based on that.
You know, on a main road, what are you gonna do if you let him off? If he breaks even an invisible fence and someone hits my dog, then I could be liable for their car.
You're making a very good argument for a pen for the dog that would give it
I
room.
have a pen.
That will give it
We do have a
room.
pen. We do have a pen. This is the
They-
first time I've ever heard about
they
this.
have a
That's the
pen-
first
they
time
have a
I've been
pen?
I've never
recommended
heard
that
about
it
that.
could be a thing. We don't have a 10x10 pen, and we certainly don't financially have the
But I do
opportunity
have a
to
pen.
provide a 10x10 pen at the
Gladly
moment.
abused.
Well, the
I
idea
will
is,
not.
the idea of a pen is also to give the dog the ability to move around more
Yeah,
and,
I understand that.
and be
As far
able
as
to
I've heard.
do, you know, a
He
pen,
has
a
over
pen,
20-foot
a
radius.
pen can mean fencing in a section of the yard, but it, you
But I
know.
understand the pen. It's
If
just
I
that
were to
if I would have
measure-
known about it quicker, I would have gladly taken the pen and moved
Your
it.
pen isn't big enough, it's not a 10x10, and if
It's
that's
still a
the
pen.
legal
It's
kenneling.
100 square feet is
Yeah,
the
if that's
Right,
legal.
which gives the dog some room to walk around and,
And in a home, or
He has more space than that.
we can have,
being
when he can get shelter during the day.
without
Yeah.
There's
a fence trapping him. He has more space than that is what I'm telling you. If I were to go back to my home right now, take a picture of a measuring tape of the space he has available on his tether, it is larger than a 10x10 space. And aside from the 10x10 space, he does have a doghouse provided for him. I'm just not sure how making a 10x10 fence around him would then alleviate the situation because he's barking because of stimulus. The only thing that's going to alleviate the situation is if I put him in the backyard, which my landlord can't handle. But I would like to say that the Massachusetts laws for nuisance dogs states, by excessive barking causing damage or other interference, a reasonable person would find such behavior disruptive to one's quiet and peaceful enjoyment. My mother is not a reasonable person. She's not sound of mind. And a reasonable person would, of 20 years being my neighbor and living directly across the street from my home, would at least have once, in a small tight-knit community like this, knocked on my door and said, "Hey, I have trouble with your dog barking. What can we do to fix this solution? Is there anything you can do?" Not once did I know what neighbor was calling the dog officer, so I could even come to a resolution with my neighbor.
Well, I think that's part of having a dog officer is your neighbors don't have to feel like they're confronting you about their dog, because usually people don't want to confront their neighbors and start a problem with the neighbors, but, I mean, I had a dog next door to my house, it barked all the time, they left it tethered out all the time. Thankfully, they only kept it for 6 months, and they got a new home for it where it wasn't gonna be tethered out to a tree 24 hours a
He's not tethered to a
day.
tree 24 hours a day. He's not out before the hours of 7 a.m. or past the hour of 9 p.m. The only time he goes out past those hours is if he's on a handheld leash and I bring him outside to use the bathroom. And he's not outside for more than 5 hours a day at any given period. And if
That
you'd
was
like
her-
to
that was
read,
her-
if you'd like to redo this meeting in about 3 to 6 months, my family would be able to provide video evidence that you would be able to, I'd be willing to submit it to you guys to watch the entire document.
Well, I have
Yes.
actually been down to Mr. Jalbert's house for a couple of weeks. I helped him put some flooring in his living room and his kitchen. And I have listened to the dog basically all day long a couple of
It's not
times. So,
possible.
It's not
well,
allowed.
it's certainly what I consider excessive. And with the windows closed, it's not so bad. In the warmer days, when you open the windows, it's annoying, and I wouldn't want to deal with it all the time. And what frustrated me was in the rainy days, the dog was out there in the rain 4 hours.
At no given
Howling.
time, sir.
He's got a doghouse. I live right up the road.
There's always-
I've been right across the street and listened to a lot of these complaints firsthand.
I
What he
live
said, I've
across
heard
the
some
road,
of,
and I don't
I've
have any
heard,
problem.
So you've been.
I've heard,
working on a house.
I've heard some of these things, so I haven't been there since September, and I don't know about all these. Are these complaints all from this job, or are these from different people, the different complaints?
These are-
They're all from, so there's other times he's called. I know from where the house is, there is one house directly across,
The
was it
Godfrey's?
Colebrook Road.
Yeah, no, it's-
And then there is the Jalbert's house across the street diagonally, and there's one more next door on the other side.
There's Sam, and then there's Fred and his
Right,
wife. One of
right.
them just recently passed away. I've spoken with Fred and his wife, and I've spoken with Sam directly across from me. This gentleman lives right next to the Godfreys, right a straight shot. So,
Meaning where? On which road?
on,
I live at 369 Summer Street. Right where
Right on
James
James.
crosses 122, right at the corner. If you're going down towards the plaza.
That's, yeah, it's quite a
It's
distance
quite a
away.
distance.
It's about twice as far as his house, but it's not that far.
It's just behind.
It's too
you.
hard.
Are you
I'm not gonna
opposed to a
discuss it
no-bark
in
collar?
But
unfortunately, at the moment, I'm a parent of a 3-year-old. I'm on welfare. If the town has any funds to locate to help solve the situation, or if Mr. Delbert would like to help me purchase one, I'd be more than willing to try
That
that.
dog
but-
is quiet, I'll buy it.
But that's what we
There,
got.
Mr. Jalbert just said if the dog is quiet as a result, he would buy one.
I wouldn't be able to affirmatively say that the dog would be quiet as a
But
result,
other times-
because some
We're willing to
dogs
do it.
don't respond to it. I would be willing to attempt it and try
Usually if you
it.
get a decent collar and
Absolutely.
they're set correctly, you're gonna have positive results of it.
Would you be able
And
to
I-
help me?
Sure.
And I will say for a fact that I know that Mr. Jalbert has labored over this and has debated whether or not he should bring it to the board, because he doesn't want to make a complaint, and he doesn't want to have a trouble with you. And that's the concerns he's expressed to me. He didn't want to have to come tonight and talk about it, because he doesn't, he likes dogs, he's got dogs.
He's been a neighbor for probably 20
And
years.
he wasn't looking to start a neighbor feud, he just would like the barking, and I think reasonably requests like the barking to stop.
And truthfully, he's the first to tell me when it does get better. Like he said, I know you haven't heard from me in a little while, but it seems to have improved greatly. So
Yeah.
I didn't want to bother you. Yeah, he's still barking occasionally, but nothing that I can't tolerate. So I don't think some of his requests, I don't think his requests are unreasonable. He's not, he will.
Right, I didn't think so either.
I mean, and truthfully, and I understand the problem with your mom, when that stretch that the dog was allowed in the backyard,
It was
I feel
great.
like that solves an
It
awful
works.
lot of it. It really
It works
works.
so
It works
good.
really, really
I,
good.
I think we should work on the backyard, would be the smartest thing.
If she's not gonna get permission, it's.
You-
I
The-
My
can't,
wife
sir.
won't do it.
The
I
condition,
cannot. She called the police on me for putting him in my own backyard.
Is there a
They-
side, when you're facing your house, how you're on the right, if you're facing it, you're on
There's a
On the right
pool
side?
there.
There's a
There's
pool back there.
directly, like,
Yeah, directly behind the fence
Yeah,
where he
when
is.
when we put the
There's a
pool in,
pool there.
we.
when you talk about a clear area, you said a 10-foot leash, a 20-foot radius?
Yep.
How much of that property is clear for the dog to
It's
be
my
on
entire
versus,
side
versus?
yard.
There's a lot of clear in that yard. I
If
mean,
you
There's
listen,
a lot of clutter in that yard as well.
I know
which
these-
I've
I'm
seen.
not here
The
about
first-
the clutter.
the first time I was there.
Excuse me, sir?
We're not here
So
about
we're
the
not
clutter.
here about clutter.
Well, I'm just saying, when we talk about the dog having free range to exercise,
It does.
I'm asked,
The first time I went
I'm
there,
asking.
that was not the case. The dog house was into some different pieces and the dog couldn't get to it and there was some things in the way. When I brought that to their attention, they resolved it immediately.
good, that's why I'm asking.
Well, if we, would you assist in choosing the caller and
course.
working with
Of
the,
course.
I'm sorry, I don't have your name.
My name's Maggie, ma'am.
Okay, Maggie. And working with Maggie to ensure that the collar is properly,
Oh, of
you
course,
know,
I'm sure I
placed
can-
and the training
I can
piece.
find out the one that I have used in the past as far as, I have one that has different settings and the nice piece about it is you can set the collar and then you can look at, you can check to see how many times it corrected.
Oh, okay.
Since the last time you put it on.
Uh-huh.
So if it's corrected your dog 33 times, you know it's not working on that setting, where if it's corrected your dog once, you're probably in a good,
Yeah,
in a good range, and it goes up to
My
5
Jack
different
Russell
levels.
did not care about it.
Yeah, I
It
mean-
was worthless on him.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain
didn't
ones,
care.
and the citronella ones work for some dogs that
That
did
was
not
my
work for my
concern,
dogs.
gentlemen. I didn't want to have him waste his money if it's not gonna be responsive, if my dog's not gonna be responsive. I don't want him.
Well, Jack Russell's just a breed that's,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah, I have a
just
dog now,
tenacious.
I don't think it
So
would
is
be
mine.
either.
No,
I
this.
just-
but there's a collie, called Border Collie
It's
and,
a border collie, Australian cattle dog mix. His name's Patches. He's a year old.
I
He's a
would, I would
beautiful
think it
boy.
would probably be effective on the dog. They don't like it, and he would try to shay his barking a little bit,
But a
but
little bit, yeah.
if something went by, he was gonna bark at me.
I mean, it
He didn't
worked
care.
well on labs that I've had in the past. I mean, the other thing that I could recommend is when he is out there and giving him some things to do, just basic things like, you know what a con toy is?
I've tried the cones. I've tried the tires. He's had the tug of war.
But even like if
he's
you had a
the-
con toy and you filled it with like
With treats, yeah, with peanut butter, yeah.
throw it in the freezer, freeze it, and you try to keep
Maximum
him,
10 to 15 minutes.
but that's 10 to 15 minutes that he's
Don't-
stimulated.
Right.
Anything that's gonna work on his, I know that, but anything that's gonna work
And-
on his brain a
10
little,
to 15 minutes.
How long should it be tethered at a time?
because it's gonna work on his brain a little bit. It's got some puzzle
No longer
qualities to
than
it.
5 hours in a total of 24-hour period, not out after. I think it's 10 p.m. at night, and I think it's 6 a.m. in the morning.
I'd have to look at
It's either 6 or 7.
I mean, I was throwing him bones just to keep him occupied. These
Sure.
real beef bones that
Yeah,
were
yeah,
cut
yeah.
slices. And I was throwing them to him as well, just to keep him busy. I'd go out and play with him a little bit. You know, I got a dog of my own. It's kind of tough to take care of two dogs.
Sometimes
So-
things that work their brain, if they're not gonna be doing physical activity, working their brain sometimes will help with that as well. Different puzzles, and I know it's a lot when you have a toddler, and I know that. But when it's things like, you know, any kind of puzzle type act, like I do nose work with my dog, which is scent work, which is, you know, just finding odors. Now, I have a very busy breed, I have a Belgian Malinois, he could scale the wall if he wanted to. Yeah, I could run him for days and he's not tired. Clearly, I don't run him. But I mean, you know, somebody could run him for
We go
days.
kayaking in the summer.
But if I work his
Kayaks.
brain, if he does something like nose work where he's
It's a life
engaging his
test.
brain, he's much more tired when I
More
bring him
active.
home than if he just played ball for 15 minutes. It's, you know, it's just
Because
work,
it's okay.
it's doing something to work his brain a little bit because he's a dog that wants a job.
Definitely a pretty dog.
I mean, other than just having dogs as pets, you have a responsibility as owners to keep the dog from barking and to keep the dog happy.
That's what a dog does.
Most dogs, I've had dogs all my life, and I've never had a dog bark like yours does. I never have.
That's excessive, but yeah.
Yeah.
I have never had a dog bark continuously like that, but I've never had a dog left alone that long. I always had dogs, when I was a kid and when my kids were around, that helps entertain the dog.
Yeah.
I think it's a frustration level for the dog.
And if the dog had to be alone in the house, I had a large kennel for the dog with a bed and toys and water.
She's
That
seen
kept
that.
kept the dog,
You've
you know,
seen that?
fine
You've
when it's
seen
alone.
Yeah,
Dog
And
has a
My
Great
concern
home
that
choices,
when we
size,
talk about, they
water
understand they
choice,
can't
like
leave in the
that.
backyard because it annoys them. We understand it's an annoyance clearly. That's very clear. Out back, it doesn't annoy the neighbors, but it annoys, you know, the homeowner. You know, doesn't mean the rest of the world should be annoyed.
I
They're
mean,
out front, so.
minimally, the no bark collar we have to try that, minimally. As far as the fencing, the 10 by 10, you know, fence would have to be, I mean, if we're going to ask them to do that as well.
That doesn't sound
The-
reasonable.
That
The-
absolutely does not sound feasible.
The
I'm
last-
a mother of a 3-year-old
Honestly-
on welfare.
And I will say truthfully, putting the pen in the front yard's not gonna probably.
That's not gonna help.
No, it's
You
not
can
gonna
still
fix
see
it.
it
Too
being
much. It would be if we
barking
could
at
get that
it.
dog in a pen in the backyard.
Well, the thing that I fear, okay, and if the bark collar doesn't work,
Then we come back here.
well, yeah, but coming back here doesn't help you.
No.
I mean, I would love to be able to wave a magic wand and say, okay, he won't be barking anymore. If the no bark collar does not work for whatever reasons, because sometimes I guess they don't, you have a dog that, as she said, not only is looking for a job, is bred to have a job. And it's very hard having those kind of animals myself. I understand their need to run and play, and I mean run and play, and, you know, and I have the opportunity to provide that, but I feel badly for the dog, I feel badly for you, and with a no bark collar, if that's the only thing that we can, at this point, impose and hope that it works, Mr. Jalbert may or may not get the result that he needs in order to have a reasonably quiet, you know, time at his own home. Because I agree with the chair when he says, you know, we all have a responsibility to, you know, to have dogs in our property that aren't necessarily, you know, causing a nuisance to all of our neighbors.
But it's not to all of our neighbors.
Yeah, I'm a
There have,
neighbor.
wait, 1 second. Have there been any other complaints from any of our neighbors directly?
But it doesn't
to the
matter.
sides of me or up the hill?
Doesn't
Everybody's
matter.
asked it doesn't matter, but I'll ask you to direct your questions to the chair and not directly to other members in the room. Okay, all your questions that
But
should
you
come.
don't have the answers I was looking for, gentlemen.
Regardless, you'll address the chair, and I will ask for the answer from the appropriate person. That's the procedures and rules for it, so we don't have a lot of crosstalk. Like I said, we've done this before, we've had former dog officers come in and ask for dogs to be dangerous dogs, which
Yeah.
I was very hesitant to do, because I like dogs, and I take dog ownership very seriously. I don't own one now because I'm not around enough, I don't have kids at home, and as much as I'd like to have a dog, I don't have the time, and the dog will be sitting alone, and that's no way to treat any animal. And I feel, I have very strong feelings on dog ownership and the responsibility of the dog owners. And, you know, when you have a breed that's some of these lap dogs that likes to just sit in your lap all day and do nothing, that's great, that's what they're for. But if you have a larger breed that needs exercise and likes to run and do those things, that you need to be able to give that dog what it needs, or you're really neglecting the animal. And I've always leaned towards nuisance, not dangerous, which dangerous isn't even questioning this.
Yeah, no.
But I lean towards a nuisance because I think without the designation, we can't
Yeah.
place any restraints on
Right.
them. So if we did want to look for a nuisance finding, then we could say we're going to, I mean, it sounds like the consensus at this point is try the bark collar, since they are adamant they can't have it out back. And I don't know what else to try other than that. My experience is it worked great on one dog I had. It did not work on the Jack Russell, but it stopped the other one, you know, 3 or 4 times. It got a little shock, and it was done barking at stuff randomly.
Like I said, I have some good brands that I could certainly recommend that have.
And you could work with Mr. Jalbert and so forth?
Of course.
With,
John, we haven't heard from you, so let's see if you have anything
So,
else to.
as far as the nuisance dog items go, I'm not sure how many of these we actually have to impose. I know it says may,
Few
but a
enough.
lot of these are extremely strict, very stringent, you know, required to be in a dog training classes, have additional insurance.
Most of those are
That's
pertaining to dangerous
That
stuff.
doesn't pertain to
Yeah.
the
So if
nuisance
the dog
dog
is
at all.
deemed a nuisance,
Well, we have,
It doesn't equate
we
to
have this
dangerous.
sheet
This
here.
is our town.
That's what we
of
have.
town
list.
bylaw. Oh,
Can I
okay.
have
So-
that? Because that's not provided online.
I have a copy.
Thank you. I couldn't find this on our town website.
There's, you know, this calls for a 12 by 12 fence instead of the 10 by 10 that's been recommended. So ultimately, I would lean towards implementing which of these that you could on your own without calling the dog a nuisance at this point. The challenge, of course, being if that doesn't work, if enough of these are imposed, I don't know how you'd be able to keep the dog, to be frank about it. As far as
Can I ask the chair where these came from? Where in the information that's accessible to the public, any of these
Certainly,
are
Jessica, where did those come from?
displayed?
This came from previous dog hearings.
but it's not available to citizens to view, to understand the, because I have all the information from the town of Barrie on the bylaws, and it doesn't explain anything about, in particular, nuisance dog, and it also doesn't explain anything having to do with what the restrictions that could happen. Most of the
My-
things in town, like,
My guess is that's something that was provided by the previous dog officer. We had
Right.
we had a hearing that she wanted a dog called Dangerous because quite frankly, she was trying to have the dog euthanized.
okay,
And we had people that, would let the dog out the front door to run to its car by itself. They never leashed it, never tethered it, and it attacked people. And part of that's because they kept it locked away from people in the house. They, I would say, encourage it to go after people when they had it on a leash. And not the dog's fault. I don't want the dog dead because the people were, quite frankly, being a horse's patootie on it.
And a lot of-
And we had quite severe sanctions. We had an insurance policy for $500,000. We had a fenced-in pen with a roof. We had a door within the door in the house so the dog couldn't bolt out the door when they opened their door. We took some very serious actions on it to stop that. And it did quell. We didn't have more, well, we were back in with the family again for a different dog that attacked and bit a neighbor running down the road. But even that, I didn't want to go dangerous because the dog's doing what it was trained to do. But the nuisance, just because there are great things you can do with nuisance, doesn't mean we have to do any of them.
And a
But-
lot
And
of
that's
these-
where
but-
it may comes into place.
but-
These are items that may be
And
placed.
But-
from a quick glance, a lot of these seem to pertain to a dog.
I will get to you in just a
because it's being loose.
Right.
Yeah.
Like a lot of these seem
Right,
to
so-
pertain to a loose dog that's a nuisance.
Right, it doesn't sound like the dog generally is let run loose. I have never seen the dog running loose. I haven't witnessed it run loose, and I don't think loose is the issue. I think the issue is just
And it has
barking.
been loose a few times, but I don't,
Um,
and Joe
it
may.
hasn't been intentional.
Well, being, I mean, if it breaks loose, it breaks loose, they all have. I mean, that could happen.
Right, anyone's dog gets loose
Anything,
at some
horse, a
point.
cow,
We-
anything.
we-
We all know that living in this town. I mean, that's not the issue.
I think her point was just when she was trying to prepare for this hearing, she couldn't find that
Right.
information.
Yeah.
I
And that's
think,
all she was trying
I,
to address.
I think that's something that was presented by a former dog officer as options we would have just to present to the board as things we could do. And when she plowed through the state law, here's all the things we could do
So
under
I-
Just
nuisance.
to be clear, these haven't been submitted into the town as a bylaw or as any type of recommendation for a nuisance dog. These are just recommendations that this particular chair and table and the previous dog owner, I just want to make sure legally I'm clear on this.
I
Right.
believe those
So-
are the things that were permissible by law, by
Yeah.
state law, by
I
the
would-
dog
I would-
officer.
By state law, nuisance dog
Yeah.
hearing, there's no,
Well, let's just,
Those
let's,
ones that fall most in
I mean,
dangerous
this,
dog.
if I could just indicate that the law for the,
I'm gonna be-
for Massachusetts that you're probably referring to allows the Board of Selectmen to make a ruling on whether or not they feel the dog is a nuisance. And then to order, if we feel it would be necessary or helpful, a mitigation, something that you might be able to do so that the nuisance would go away, which we think could be this no bark collar. Now, we're not positive that, so we could do something as simple as that. I don't know what that list has really nothing to do with your specific circumstances, just something that was utilized probably in a previous hearing.
More of ideas of
So
things that could be
it's
done.
very clear in the statute, if we just deem, after hearing the testimony here, that the dog is a nuisance because of the barking, we can say, okay, we think the dog is a nuisance, it's really troubling, it troubles your mother-in-law, is it your mother-in-law? No.
Grandmother.
Your mother, and it bothers the neighbors, and so what can we do to make that nuisance go away? Obviously, we care very much about the dog and his or her, health and situation, so we don't want to do something silly that would be awful for the dog. The dog officer has made, a large pen would maybe help, et cetera. You indicate that would be.
Admittedly not out front, which is.
Yeah,
which is-
that would be very difficult for you financially.
That's not
We-
just what I said, also the resolution, not just being classist here because I can't afford it. The thing was that it wouldn't solve anything if it was right up front, and it's not able to be
Right.
placed in the backyard, even if I could afford it, even if I can go buy a 12 by 12, even if I go on Facebook and someone donates me a 12 by 12 fenced-in area right now. It
But we're not-
doesn't
we're
make
not-
a difference
Why are we
because
going
it's
through the
not gonna go in
fencing when
front.
we're working about the collar first?
Right, I think.
I'm
that-
trying to get there. I'm
Right.
trying to get there, and there seems to be resistance on your part to acknowledge that there is a nuisance, that there is a problem. You have a neighbor who complained, yes, appropriately so, but who's willing to help be part of the solution. So why are we going on and on about this? Quite frankly, the dog barks incessantly at periods of time. The chair has heard this, other people have heard this. It is a nuisance. I would make the motion going forward that we deem the dog a nuisance and that we ask, okay, for there to be a remediation, which would be a bark collar, and for Mr. Jalbert, if necessary, to return to this board if there's not, it doesn't improve situations. I hope it will. I hope it will be something that the dog will take to and go, okay, I'm not doing that when he goes to bark. I know that you've had some experience with some sort of a bark collar, and it works well for her dog. So you've had, positive experiences, others maybe not so much, but let's start there. To sit and, nitpick, where you read it or where you didn't read it is irrelevant.
It is relevant because it's important that citizens of our town have access to the information pertaining to the things that they're coming in front of the Board of Selectmen to.
Well, I think the general laws are very specific, and you've had numerous conversations with our dog officer.
I'll give you that.
And
We have the
that's-
general laws of Massachusetts.
Then you
And-
should understand that
that is
the
what,
actions
that
taken by the board,
is right off the general
we
laws.
have
So it's
the
clear.
ability. We
So
can't
to be
even,
clear,
we
we
can't
don't-
say anything like even a shot collar, for barking unless we deem it a nuisance, but we don't have to do
Doesn't have to be.
So-
any,
Yeah.
no, it doesn't.
To be clear, we
Yeah,
don't need to input
I mean, if
the items that are listed on here.
No,
Those are
no.
not required.
Right.
In light of that, I am, more favorable to the collar idea. I think this list would have been excessive. It's not something that's required, so I don't think we
Is
need
that
to
a
worry
second
about
on Maureen's motion?
that. I will second that.
Okay, so we do have a motion to second, so before we cast a vote on it, are there any last comments before we vote on pertaining specifically to just deeming the dog nuisance?
That would be my motion, to deem the dog a
Okay.
nuisance, and to ask for,
Well, we'll just deal with that for now. Okay, so I'll call for vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And now, what we were discussing is the actions to take, which we've discussed pretty heavily. And I want to make sure the dog officer is in agreement that probably the simplest, humanest, easiest thing for everyone to try is a bark collar. And Mr. Jalbert that's very gracious to offer to pay
Yes.
for it, to help, because he just doesn't want the noise. He's not trying to put you out. He doesn't want to get you in trouble. He doesn't want the dog hurt. Believe me, I've heard well, I don't want the dog hurt. I don't want to. I know, but you got to have a hearing to talk about it. And this is how we do it.
I will say, I just heard Mr. Weatherby say that it doesn't have to be a shock collar, that there are other types of devices.
Right.
I'm gonna tell you that 90% of them are not effective. The ultrasound and all the ultrasonic and all those things.
Yeah.
And if Mr. Jalbert is gonna be the one putting his money out, he's not gonna pay for 3 things to try before we get to the
I
shock
don't wanna see the
collar.
dog hurt either. I mean, you're gonna hurt
If
the
you
dog.
would like to purchase a citronella collar or an ultrasonic device and try that,
So are you trying to say you
so
wanna hurt
be
the
it.
dog to make him quiet? I can't see that. I mean, I own a dog and I would never do that to my dog. I'm just,
from
gotta be
personal
a way.
experience, the citronella collar is not gonna work. The ultrasonic device is not gonna work. I don't see Mr. Jalbert wasting his money on those devices. And then we're gonna say it requires a shock collar, because that's.
I definitely have experience with a shock collar, and we had one dog that did not like it, a couple of barks, and he was done.
I
They knew they get a, they knew they get a yip, and then if the second bark it goes.
Well, I would just tell you that I have a situation where I have one of those fence, right? And if the dog
Right.
goes near it, they get a little
Yeah.
shock. Well, one time, the dog, I noticed that the dog was beyond the so-called fence. And I said, I wonder why that is. So the dog then wouldn't come back into the yard
Yeah.
because he would get.
When they get
Okay,
near the wires, when they get
I
the shock.
went to get the dog, I said, I'll take his collar off, okay? So I put it on my arm. This is so stupid, okay? And I'm walking back through the wire, okay? And I got the shock. Trust me when I tell you, it was like, oh, but it certainly was not something that hurt me, or that 2 seconds later I was saying, oh, I can't believe that happened. I couldn't believe I was that stupid. But the shock itself was,
And there were different levels of
Yeah.
that. You don't
Yeah.
start on level 10.
I put mine on my leg
Okay,
before it went on my dog.
okay,
Here, we also had a border collar like that.
Yeah.
But he didn't care. He learned that if he just, you get close and they had a warning tone before they got shocked.
They do have
He
a
learned if
warning.
he ran, he just got one zap going through and he was gone. So he just had to stay on a run when I put him out. I couldn't let him pee without being on a run because he was gonna go. That's all he was gonna do.
But
And he
I
didn't care
understand your
about the shock.
concerns as far as the shock piece.
I know-
But I personally, and if somebody has another solution, I'd love to hear. I personally don't know what are the suggestions to offer. If we can't move them to the backyard, if we're not gonna keep them in the house other than being leash walked, which is not an option either with your toddler, you've told me. So if he's not gonna be in the house with you 90% of the time other than being leash walked, if he's, or out on the run for 10 minutes, if he's not gonna get moved to the backyard, if, I personally just don't know of another alternative or another option to try to correct the problem. I don't know what the solution
Tear
is.
that couch up.
Mhm.
In that house all day, he would tear that couch up. I'd give my kid a bath and I'd have no couch cushions left.
And I know,
Well,
so. again,
That's where you
my-
recommend a kennel with a blanket or a dog bed.
You
And
can't just leave him in there
But I guess
for 10
my-
hours a
He's got a
day
kennel.
while I'm outside doing
Well-
yard work. That's fucked up.
I guess my
To keep
point
him
is
in.
that I'm kind of at, which is maybe why we ended here, is I'm kind of at my wit's end for solutions, other than the bark collar. I don't know what else to offer.
Mhm.
I don't think truthfully a citronella collar or those other devices are going to work. You can, you are certainly willing to try it. It wouldn't be something I would recommend starting. I mean, I feel that most of the time they're a waste of money. A bark collar does start, I mean, I love my dogs more than I even like most people. I wouldn't do anything to hurt
Don't
my.
we all?
Yeah. I wouldn't do anything to hurt my dogs. I've used a bark collar. I live in a very residential neighborhood. It was a solution that was gonna make everybody happy. You start in a certain lower setting, you can tell if that setting is working, and if it's not, you bump it up one, you don't bump it up twice.
Yeah, you can
Then
come
you
down
bump it
and
up
teach
another,
me all
and
this
then he gets,
educate
and I'm
me
sure,
make
and then when he
it
gets to that
go
point that he goes, oh, I didn't like that, I'm not gonna do that again, we're at the right level.
John, you
I
had
know-
something else?
Yeah, I'll echo their sentiments too. Just growing up with a dog, we had a bark collar, well, with some form of electric collar. And, you know, we tested on ourselves, even the electric fences for the horses. Like, I wouldn't subject any animal to something I wouldn't be comfortable with myself.
Well, the horse fence, those get a wall.
Yeah.
Those are fun.
That's a little
I've touched that too, but whoa.
Hard
Wolf.
because growing up in Barrie and growing up here my whole life, our dogs growing up weren't even on leashes. Like, they just hung out on the property, stayed in the yard, didn't run after anything, and times change and things are
If your
different
dog
now.
stays in your property and is controlled by voice commands, you're not required to have a leash.
Yes, you are.
But no, you're
In
not.
Massachusetts,
No, you're
in
not.
Barrie,
No,
yes.
not under your,
No,
you're not
no,
on
you're
leash
not.
law, but if your dog is under your control.
If your dog is
On
under
your
your control of the
property.
voice command, that's, like if you see the
On
state
your own
police with the police
On your
dog,
property.
Yeah.
you see the state police with the dog, that dog, once they take it off, it does exactly what it's told. And but yeah, if your dog will stay on its property with a voice command, you don't have to have a leash on it.
well,
And this dog is still very young. I mean, there's
yes,
a great
And he's not-
opportunity
and he's not
for
neutered,
Yeah.
correct?
for training.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And if
So
it
that's not an issue
develops,
down the road.
if it develops the habit of not barking from the shock, that habit stays as he gets older. By the time dogs are 2, they really become adults. So you get another year for him to learn. And if he learns not to bark so much, then he won't be a
Half
barker.
the time I used to be able to put that collar on my dogs without turning it on.
I know, 'cause they just-
Oh, the
Just
collar.
listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ugh,
they know.
Fine.
You're telling us all the possibles, the good points, but it could be.
So basically, can I just summarize, are we agreeable that in order to address the nuisance that we've identified, that there will be the purchase of a shock collar of some sort that would be, Mr. Jalbert will I guess, pay for, and would you be responsible to help them initially get the dog fitted for that and so forth, and set it up?
Yeah. We'll go through it, we'll figure out how it works. And Joe, if you're okay with that, you and I can discuss
Yeah, that's fine.
your price point
I'm
and
not unreasonable about it, I just.
No, you certainly aren't, Mr. Jalbert. I mean,
find your
in
price
fact,
point and we
I'm
can
really amazed.
decide on what
Whatever it
collar.
costs, whatever, I don't care.
Well, I need a few things for the kennel, no, I'm kidding.
That's like they care.
Yeah, just throw it in there.
Do you feel the necessity of voting?
I know.
Yes.
Call?
Yep, now that we've done it, we have to give our decision on what we're gonna deem, and then
Necessary.
you need a benchmark, because if it doesn't happen,
Yeah.
we need to revisit and say, okay, this was already, you didn't do it, now we have to do something.
I think it's something.
And you don't wanna get there, but
And I can, you
if
know,
we
can
skip,
try to see
if we
can
skip
find
a
some-
motion on it, then
I'll try to
it's
think of
nothing.
any other
We'll
kind
have
of
to come back and do
mental
it, take the
activity for
motion
him to
next
do
time.
too, that might make him a little
He's
bit more.
got more activity in him than is being done.
So I'd look for the motion.
Okay, I would make a motion then that we, in order to address the nuisance that we have deemed, that the dog be fitted with an appropriate shock collar to stop his barking, and that would be supervised by our dog officer, and that Mr. Jalbert, and his, I can't tell you how generous I think this is, will be working with the dog officer to actually purchase this device, and that the owners have agreed that they will work with the dog officer in order to learn how to do it and to fit the dog for it, and we'll all do this.
And we'll do our best to make it a positive experience for him. It doesn't have to be a negative thing.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Okay, so we have a motion to second to have a dog bark collar, shock style, purchased by Mr. Jalbert and to be implemented with you for the dog, through the dog officer. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Aye.
And my
I think-
thanks to you, Mr.
Yeah, I
Jalbert,
think
for
it's-
your patience and your generosity in trying to solve the problem.
It doesn't surprise me, he's been, torn about doing this in the first place. He asked me, because the dog officer recommended asking for a hearing, I said, that's all he can do is have a hearing. And he doesn't want something bad to happen to the
No,
dog,
I
he
know
doesn't
that.
want the dog hurt, he doesn't want the
And we're
dog,
not suggesting they get rid of the dog, we didn't want, to put any of that emotion if we could fix this problem.
Just a quick question though, don't you guys feel like this resolution could have been, come to his neighbors? Didn't I already express my interest, hold on, real quick, didn't I already express my interest with you?
I think when you deal with the neighbors, usually people go through the dog officer, that's what the dog
Okay.
officer is for.
I will,
I expressed interest in a shock collar, no bark collar over 6 to 8 months ago.
Through
I
the
know, and I
chair,
was attempting to provide one for you, I just didn't have one.
At this point, once it comes to us, it's here.
And I guess my other,
Isn't that silly?
I'm gonna.
I don't think that's for us to
in
decide.
response to that,
Woman to woman.
in response to that, your dad did know who made this complaint a few weeks back, and you could have certainly gone over and addressed it with Mr. Jalbert as well. So this is a
But it's been
two-issue.
coming back for,
Well, I know.
you said about a year.
But I'm just saying, you could have certainly crossed the street and shook his hand and said, how can we resolve this problem as well?
After he already came to this board of selectmen, you don't feel like if I had known who it was and I could have come to a resolution with him? Anytime I've ever had an issue with one of my neighbors, I've always
I
felt
don't
like I
have
could
anything
talk
against
to
you
him.
personally, it's the
I'm
dog.
just saying, I've
not you.
always felt like.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the crosstalk, please. I understand you're upset. But it is here, and the dog does bark a lot, and you've admitted that it annoys people in your house out back, and I don't think it's.
I've said that my mother is mentally ill to the point
And I
that she
think
doesn't
it's,
function
and
in society.
excuse me, I
So
think
my
it's,
mother's
excuse
opinion
me,
is about the
that's
grain
enough.
of rice.
That's
Because
enough.
she literally cannot function enough
Hey,
to pay her own mortgage at
She's
the
the
bank.
homeowner, she's paying your mortgage, because you're not
You
paying
go
anything.
to pay the mortgage
Yeah,
because she
well,
doesn't
we
leave
pay
her
the
home.
mortgage. You're
So
living
her
there because
opinion,
Now, stop.
Yes,
It's
this is,
literally-
I'm seeing that, and this is
Stop.
unfortunate. This is unfortunate.
Yes.
because my
Um,
dog could have just gone into the backyard.
I think
and
you're
been
very,
free to
I think you're
treat.
very fortunate that Mr. Jalbert,
We're gonna fix the front.
I think you're very fortunate Mr. Jalbert offered to pay for it, because we would have ordered it anyways.
He's a saint.
And then you'd have to come up with the money yourself, if Mr. Jalbert hadn't volunteered to pay
Or
for it.
what?
Or what, you'd lose your dog. The dog will go to,
How? But how? Literally how?
it's
Because
simple, the
not a
dog officer
bylaw.
comes down, he takes the dog and brings it to a shelter, and somebody else adopts it that'll take care of
Well,
it. But we're
let's,
trying to avoid that, that's the whole point.
But there's nothing in the Massachusetts state law that says buy a nuisance dog, you can take it. Am I correct? There's nothing. That is not a recommended or even an allowed action.
know when you've won the deal and leave. You have a good
Just
solution.
understand the state law. You can't make something up. You can't make a consequence for something up.
Wow.
You can't. 'Cause then I would just
I
appeal
think
it,
you'll
and I would keep
find,
going.
I think,
You could, and then a clerk magistrate would
At a courthouse.
come with the same resolution if you want to appeal the decision. But you have a very good deal right now with Mr. Jalbert willing to help you and
God,
I'm
I
willing
guess.
to help you. And I think this could be a win-win.
Yes.
So
I think it will be, but I don't think it had to come to this to be a resolution. I think
Regardless
that
of
we
whether
could
it had
work
to,
more
it-
as
it-
neighbors.
This is where it is, and I think this is a good solution for everyone, and I think it's very
I think we're gonna-
kind of Joe to offer to pay for.
Oh, God, yes.
I didn't expect that,
Me neither.
but it doesn't surprise me
Mr.
knowing
Jalbert's
Joe.
gonna fix he's gonna be offered to pay for the collar. I'll work with them to decide which one's a good price point and which one's
I
gonna
would,
work.
you know better than me, you can pay and I'll give you the check, how's that?
I love when a man says that.
She's
We'll
a
make it work.
character.
Of course, okay?
All right, that concludes the business for that tonight, and we will
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
hopefully not need to follow up on it.
Right, the last thing that we need to let the dog owner know is that within 10 days of the decision of the board, that you may appeal the decision at the East Brookfield District Court, which doesn't exist right now, so.
Is it at the schoolhouse in
It's at the
Spencer?
school.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in Spencer on,
Spencer
is it Main
It's
Street?
not-
31, it's right up,
31.
it's Route 31, right, that's where
But at
that
a
is.
district court, you can appeal the
If you decide
decision.
you want to appeal the decision, let me know and I'll find
You-
out.
You'd have to go to that courthouse
Yeah,
in
it's the old school right on Spencer.
in
They
Spencer,
will,
right.
they will laugh you out of the court.
So,
Well, she's welcome, she's
Yeah.
certainly welcome.
I would be
Due
back
process,
on the
due
court.
process is due process, and if she wants
I
to
would be
appeal it,
back, you wanted to court.
she,
You what? No, I said the court would laugh this out because there's a resolution that you don't have to pay for that is going to be supervised by the dog officer that hopefully will work and everybody wins.
that's recommended by the dog
I'm-
officer as well, so
Yeah,
this
I mean,
is,
it's not that anybody is trying to in any way disparage you or the efforts that you've made to try to quiet the dog. We understand what it's like to have a young dog, puppy, about 40 weeks old.
you're the young child.
Yeah, it's not easy, but hopefully this is a solution that everybody can make happen. And in coming in front of the Board of Selectmen is not this horrible, awful thing, and I hope you didn't feel it was this horrible, awful thing. It's just the way in which we can resolve a problem, okay, between two citizens. That's all this is.
and I think it's a reasonable resolution, I really do, but you are welcome.
Yeah.
We're in no way discouraging, if you want to appeal it, you're welcome to appeal it. It doesn't offend me in any way, shape, or form. If you want to do that, you can do that. and
And
the court-
if that's your decision, I'll let you know where the new courthouse is because they closed the.
So you're certainly
Brookfield
welcome,
building, which
you're
is
certainly
expensive.
welcome to do
Why did they
that,
close
so.
But I think the Barton Collar will be a decent solution.
And
Well,
I think
John-
honestly, being it's only a year old, by the time he's 2, he just won't be a barker. Then you
Well,
won't need the collar. I mean,
Yeah.
well, it's really, it's
Yeah.
habits. Dogs form habits, and
Yeah.
good and bad. And
well,
hopefully,
It's a great starting point, and
Oh,
hopefully it will
absolutely.
solve the problem.
absolutely, that'll be great.
hopefully it does. So, thank you everyone for coming, and we'll hope we don't hear about it again. Hope it stops it all up.
Thank you.
I'm gonna
And you
Have a
too.
good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
It's very nice.
Yeah, you guys can, if you can talk quietly about a caller if you want, so you don't disrupt the meeting, but, personnel appointments, what do we have? Let me get into my packet. Obviously, fire department ones I won't be involved in. Oh,
Yeah, that's next. If you want to do appointments first.
yes, well, we can do you guys need a lot of time? I mean, I can be here when you,
No, we've had access to this for at least a week, so I think we're set.
I've had a good time to go through it.
Yeah.
all right, so do you guys want to make a motion or take action on that?
I
The
would-
union
The
fire
union,
contract?
the union has ratified the contract, and our attorney has indicated that after their ratification, it would be appropriate for us to ratify after we review the contract. Obviously, I've had
Have a good night.
a good deal of time to review it, as I've been involved in the negotiation process. John, you've indicated you've had time to review it?
Yeah, and I took some of the experience, some second, third-hand experience I've had from other towns when they've, implemented a union, and I think this negotiation has avoided a lot of those pitfalls.
Mhm.
I think it's,
Our
think it's
attorney
been
was
done
there
well.
at all times, so that was helpful. And I would move approval of the agreement between the Town of Barrie and the Barrie Professional Firefighters Local 5319, International Association of Firefighters, AFL-CIO. that was negotiated during the last probably 4 months, and the contract would become effective July 1, 2022, and expire three years hence, or June 30th, 2025.
Second?
So we have a motion and a second to ratify this contract with the Barrie Firefighters Union. Is there any further discussion on that? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
And I will abstain.
It looks like it's a vote, and Jessica, would you take the responsibility of formally in writing, letting them know that we have ratified that contract?
Yep.
Thank you so much.
All right,
We'll
we
need
have,
signatures on the copies,
Oh, I just
so
did that. You can
maybe,
just,
I think John has a.
John has a clean copy?
Of the contract?
Mine, I just put,
mine's clean, I haven't
Oh,
touched
you're-
it, because
okay.
I won't.
okay. I'll sign it, and John can sign it, and we're ready, good to go.
So while you're working on that, we have wage authorization for Barrie Police Department for Joshua Pease. He's currently part-time police officer, and they want to make him a full-time police officer. Moving the wage authorization from $21.50 to $21.84.
I would move approval.
Second?
Motion to second to approve wage authorization for Joshua Pease. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. The vote, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Then we have a firefighter, Scott Sheridan, FD Step 4, FD 2 Step 4, going to FD 3 Step. I believe what it is he just got his CPR, his EMT certification. So he's going to have a pay increase.
He's an on-call?
Yeah, just on call.
Okay.
Yeah. So that step would be
63.
1963 an hour.
I would move approval.
Second?
Motion is second to approve Scott Sheridan's step increase. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain?
So these next two items on the agenda for the Board of Assessors and the Planning Board, we actually need to hold joint meetings with both of the boards in order to make appointments, so we're gonna have to table that until May 2nd.
Okay, and I want to check anyways. I know the planning, I always have mixed emotions when a board wants somebody on their board. I mean, I like diversity on a board, and you don't always want to have everyone, pull someone like-minded and that's going to do what they want. I believe what happened in the elections is the person who won both seats was the same person, so they take one seat, leaves the other one open. But if we talk with Ellen, we will have a person that was second runner-up in that seat by town vote, and that's who I would lean towards appointing.
But it looks like it has to be a joint appointment. Is that correct?
No,
Correct.
it does? for
So
the pla-
joint, yeah, that's, Ellen and I went through the Mass General Law today, and that's the way that, we interpret it, is that it comes to a joint meeting and then there's a joint appointment. And I know in my experience in another community it's also a joint appointment between the two boards where this person is sitting on. And the leading board of the municipality.
I'd like to look at the language in that before we do that, but we can certainly have the meeting with them, and I would like to find out. And I'd be shocked if the planning board wasn't worried about that too. I mean, if the voters have spoken and said we want this person, and that was the second choice, I don't know why we wouldn't take the second choice of the voters rather than
How many
who
people
the
are on the
committee
planning
wants in
board?
their group. Do you know what I mean?
There's 5 full-time members, and then this is an
Well,
associate.
they're going to outvote us if they want it, because there's 5 of them.
Maybe not.
Okay. We've
never gone with a group meeting before, so I don't know what
I
we missed.
know that for a school committee
Right.
person, I know it's a joint appointment because it's in the regional agreement, but I'm not sure about that general statute, but obviously in review, if it appears that it needs to be a joint meeting, we'll just have to wait till.
So in
I think
years
there are
past.
also a lot of questions that I'd personally like answered by each of the people interested. Why, someone wasn't running for the position, things like that, of that nature. So I don't know if there'd be an opportunity to either speak, have them more or less, I don't know if it'd be an interview, so to speak, but to have some of those
Yeah.
I
questions
don't know if
answered.
Tony did or didn't run for that position.
He ran
I
for
don't remember.
Board of Health, I thought.
Tony
not.
ran
But-
for the full-time planning board seat
Only, he didn't do it.
Right.
only,
Right.
correct?
And someone
And
else
also
won the
for
full-time. So
Board
he
of Health.
he may be the second vote in the, well, no, he wouldn't be the part-time, but
No.
So that, and it's tough. There's a lot to weigh, but we certainly have the meeting
Yeah, we'll have the,
and
so
discuss it.
we'll do that in 2 weeks. We'll have the joint
May
meeting.
2nd.
I'd just like to be prudent, and if there was if we seem to have a opinion expressed by the voters, you'd like to see it carried through.
Well, the only trouble is, there could be somebody who the voters didn't realize might be interested and didn't, you know.
Well, that's the same thing. You got to balance whoever got the second place votes for the assistant seat versus how many Tony got for the full-time position, you know.
Realistically, we don't know what the voters would have voted for if he had run for this position. It's a one-year position. I know, at least for me, my mentality is very different for someone for a 5-year versus 1 year if someone's looking to get that experience and become involved versus someone who has that experience. So I
Right.
think it's really impossible to say what the vote would have been. if you
Right,
run.
but you can see what kind of votes they get in the public interest in the candidates, and also see what the board's interest in is in certain candidates over others, or why. I just,
Yeah.
Well, I think it'll be a good opportunity for us to discuss it and to talk, and they
it'll
will.
be a healthy meeting.
And they will bring their candidates or people, is that the,
We can, yes, we can invite them
Okay.
for a interview,
Yeah.
so if you want to call it a.
Yeah, I would think that would be the
well, I mean,
prudent thing to do.
we have not, for example, put out sort of a thing to the public saying, by the way, these are open seats, there will be an appointment opportunity, because there could be people that aren't currently right in the mix that
Right.
might be interested. So we probably should put something, see if there are candidates, other candidates. Maybe there won't be anybody
You can
who's,
certainly
I think
advertise it on the
particularly-
site.
Particularly with the Board of Health one too, where there weren't other people running for that position
Right.
that's vacant. I think that one especially would be good to advertise.
The
and-
Board of
So-
Assessors.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Board of Assessors.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, and there's a lot of seats if we don't make a rush to try to appoint somebody to them. And just because one person comes forward and says, oh, I'd like to take the appointment,
Oh.
doesn't mean it's the right way to
We
appoint.
agree, we agree.
And some we won't address, but since we have very quickly, we have the planning board asking for this member. It's very,
And
the day after the election, they were asking for this person to be appointed.
Right, and the Board of Assessors came forward to
Which
me
is
pretty
strange.
quickly with Mr. Jenkins as their recommendation to the select board for appointment. But as we mentioned before, we've never done it this way in the past, but somebody from the community emailed me, reached out to me this morning and said, hey, just to let you know, this is the Mass General Law. So Ellen and I kind of dug into that a little bit this afternoon and
Well, it's-
figured we should probably
seems to
do
be
it
a
the
mu-
right way.
Look at
Much
Mass General
fairer way.
Laws and also the Barre Bylaws.
Yeah.
The Barry bylaws are not clear on, because we went there too. The Barry bylaws are not clear, especially because this position is the planning board associate, so they are a non-voting member, unless it's a special permit or they, somebody is absent and they need to. So even this position is kind of an anomaly compared to if it were a full-time, regular
Yeah.
planning board member.
So either way, that'll be tabled until we have
Okay, sounds good.
people here. And I'm glad we had a little discussion on it to see what we're in for next time.
And I appreciate that we're, taking the time to get it right and knowing what the laws have and making sure we do what's best for the people.
Yep.
Election workers, we have just the one Catherine Flick
Correct.
from Walnut Hill Road. We look for a motion on that.
I would move Catherine Flick to act as an election worker.
Second?
Motion second to appoint Catherine Flick as an election worker. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Lions Club Car Show.
I believe this is, all the paperwork is now done. I know we looked at this previously when it wasn't quite complete.
I don't have an EMS plan, they have a traffic, blah, blah, blah. They do have approval from police, EMS, building, health, conservation, and planning, so they have all their sign-offs. Would entertain a motion for approval.
Move approval?
Second?
Motion approval to allow the Barrie Lions Club to have their special event up on the Common once again on September 10th. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now we have a boot drive for the 250th anniversary. They're requesting to use the Common in various areas to do a boot drive. They have no plans set forward, but they do have approval of the required departments. Now, that's something the fire department did eons ago,
Yeah.
but eons, I say, when I was in town, we did it for like 10 years, but they haven't done a muscular dystrophy boot drive in a lot of years, so we've typically had one a year from some group.
I believe they've done a boot drive last year for the 250th.
Correct.
Yeah, and it was done, I think someone else did it before, but
You could-
I try not to pound the town with these, but to
Yeah.
have one, I think, is certainly reasonable.
I would move
Especially-
approval of the request from the 250th committee to operate a boot drive on the date that they have
May
requested, of
21st.
May 21st.
Second.
Motion is second to approve the boot drive for the 250th Anniversary Committee on May 21st. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Aye. We also have the 250th asking for a special event permit for, what was this one for? The other
The
one?
food
Just a
truck and
Food
craft
truck festival
fair.
again?
Food truck and craft fair.
Food truck and craft fair.
Oh, what date have they got that, this
That was
one?
nice.
No, September 17th.
September something?
They had such great weather, I remember October
Are
last.
they gonna shoot for more food trucks this year, I hope?
Yeah, I think the issue, last
There was so much
year,
going on, right?
Rutland had
It was
their
late.
food truck festival the same day.
There was that going on, it was close to the Big E, and
Yeah.
it was just.
There was a couple of things
Well,
going
even
on, and the
May's-
food trucks
is-
were a little busy.
Is it 9/17, right in the,
That is in the middle of
Big E.
Yeah.
that's tough to
Or,
compete.
yeah, it's somewhere around the Big E,
Yeah, I
either
think.
like the first day or the last, in the middle
Yeah,
or something like that.
let's hope it works for them. So we have a motion for that?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion second to approve the Food Truck and Craft Festival for 250th on September 17th. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Where Rivershed Water Committee, the advisory committee, where they're gonna meet in the town hall again?
Yes,
Okay.
and I think this is a backup in the event that they are not able to hold it at the place that they originally wanted to hold it. So this is in the event that that doesn't work out, I think in Rutland or wherever it is.
Okay, so it's May 19th, from
6
6
to
to 9 PM. If it occurs here, folks, 6 to 9 PM, May, that is the 19th,
And so they want to use the town hall for this?
as
I know that-
a backup location.
I understand that they have huge crowds at these things, and that they had to go to the school auditorium.
They were trying to, right before COVID, they were trying to close down all the gates and shut down.
And that's why
If
there
you're
was
up
such a crowd.
122,
Yeah.
right before the river, there's that parking area to the left where you go down the gate.
Yep,
And that gate would have blocked access to our cemetery and some of our roads down there, so we're
Right.
against that. But it also has a drop down for parking, and lots of people park and fish there. And they came out with some absurd statements like, well, someone might go down there and wash their car.
that happens.
Who is going to wash their car down there? Well, they could dump a 50-gallon jug of chemicals in the water right there. Well, they could do it over the bridge. I mean, it does.
Yeah.
You know, I said, you guys have some sort of water sampling program going on that would catch this if they did? Or it went further upstream we don't know about? And the answer is no. They were just trying to find ways to shut it down
Well,
because it's
I
easy
mean,
to maintain, I
I
think.
certainly would move approval on this, and as a backup, but I know that the last couple of meetings that they've attempted to have, they were such overflow crowds, they couldn't
People
house them.
do not want these things closed
Yeah,
down.
I don't
And-
blame them. So I would certainly approve the May 19th request as a backup, should they need it, and it's, when it says number of people who attend 50.
Yeah.
Second.
A motion, a second to approve the May
If they need
19th. If they need it. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for vote. All those in favor? Aye.
And that's a Friday night as well, so. Oh, that's-
I think that's a Thursday.
oh, is it the Thursday, May 19th?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, budget proposal. I haven't looked at this much because I just got it on my email, so I would say if you want to give us anything you think we need to know before we take it home and review it for next meeting and have, it, you know, there's,
Is there any way, Jessica, that you can give us a year-to-date expenditure on all of these accounts?
Yep, so every 2 weeks, the accountant emails all of the select board members as well as all department heads a year to, the most recent warrant.
Okay, so we'll be
So
at,
you do get every 2 weeks an update on what we've expended out of each
okay.
account.
And so we will be getting one of those this week?
She usually sends them on Friday, yep.
Yeah, okay, so this would be, so we can use Friday's numbers then as pretty accurate? You
Yes.
haven't done any adjustments or moving funds around as you've seen some
I don't
accounts?
have the authority to
Accounts
move
going over,
funds.
okay.
And even we actually don't, that's the finance committee. We recommend, I think, in finance, move it.
Well, it's just important
But
to kind of
it's-
see if, if we have some areas where expenditures have
Yeah.
exceeded what the appropriation was,
Right.
because,
Hopefully not, we're usually not too bad, except for, of course, snow and ice,
which we
is-
already took care of, right?
Right. The
Right,
snow and ice have
and
been-
it should be good,
Yeah.
but that's typically how that's funded.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a balance your budget item to a point sometimes. If you try to hit it exact and you had
Oh,
a
no, no,
big year, then
no.
you're wasting money.
Oh, no, I understand.
And you
I
can
just,
certainly
I just
cut a
kind
few
of,
grand out of it.
if we can figure out we're into the, the third quarter, so we should be able to have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen by June, unless
Right.
you have some insights and you say, oh, wait, we are waiting for this big bill.
Right, no.
Or something.
Well, we
for-
can't transfer funds till
Until after. the-
after May, right, after
Yeah.
May
Oh, well, I'm not looking to
25th or
transfer
something.
money.
Typically, we do it after the fiscal year is over, and we go back and we clean up.
I would
So
just,
everything's
I would just
done.
be using this from a thing to say, what,
Right.
if we have a proposal in a particular line item that's, an increase, and we see that we run way behind, I can understand that. But if there's just a general increase, and that may be something we ask a question about, or a huge overage, we could say, how come of that? And
Right.
Usually,
just so-
usually they're pretty good, but department heads have been pretty good about staying pretty close to their budgets.
Yeah.
I think this-
I
I do
know-
have
I know that-
concerns, I've read that you said that the library is asking for more funding because they're trying to change your hours and personnel, which I think is excessive, and I'm not inclined to look for more funding for the way they're trying to do it. I don't think we have that much foot traffic that they need to
Well-
make sure they have somebody in every floor to,
Mm-hmm.
whatever they're doing.
The library, as you know, is going under, it's gonna be under some new leadership, so I'm working with the new leadership to kind of cut that budget back. We've already cut it back considerably from what the last library director proposed, and I'm still gonna work on, reining those numbers.
Our
a little bit.
larger concern with the library every year hasn't been, we've changed some titles and job position, given people a few more hours to try to help fill in. But the key is every year, they need a certain level of funding to
Yes.
stay in their, to share,
Accreditation.
accredit, so they can share services and books and things with other libraries. So it's important we make sure we meet that mark.
Yeah.
And that they, if any money goes to that, it's fine, but I'm.
But it's one of those catch-22 things where when one thing increases, that one has to increase. So that's why the approach that I wanted to take this year with the departments was saying, let me know, what do you need in order to best provide the best service that you can to residents? And then that gives me a benchmark to say, okay, here's where we're at, here's where that department head thinks we need to be, and then where do we meet, and how do we make it a multi-year approach to
The-
kind of get to where they need to be, instead of just saying, level fund.
The
level
tricky thing coming up, we do try to level fund, but we want to have some growth, and level funding should mean there should have been some growth built in normally. But the concern is, as Dr. Marshall's pointed out before, we don't want to start kicking in CARES Act money to give them little perks here and there
Oh,
and
no.
burn up the budget and set a trend where we can't have the budget next year. The budget,
Right.
spending of that CARES Act money, when we do decide to spend it on, and what we spend it on, if not put it into a stabilization account in some portion as well, that's going to be totally separate from this budget. We really want to make sure this constraint stays within our revenues. If our revenues are on target, that's fantastic. And if we can assume a little growth reasonably, that's great. And if we can balance our budget that way, I'm very happy. But we don't want to get to the point that everyone's asking for something. We say, oh, we're going to give you all this and start raising taxes, because that's not what people want. Taxes are going to go up a little bit every year usually anyways, and we've been doing a decent job to keep it under the
I would
2.5%.
suspect our fuel oil account is going to take a huge hit coming forward.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's gonna be a tough one.
that's got to be a hit.
I mean, it's going to be a hit.
And it's.
And the gasoline that for our police and so
But
forth.
percentage-wise in our budget, it's not that huge. So, that might mean maybe we have to take the whole 2.5% this year instead of 2
Yeah.
or 1.8. We've
Yeah,
been
well-
doing good on not maxing out
I mean,
the
geez, just the
2.5%.
heating oil alone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's gonna be a rough
nuts.
ride.
It's to double the money on it.
Yeah, it is. It's really
been-
gonna be tough.
You know, I'm looking at, just did my taxes, I think my fuel write-off last year, I had $1,200 in substitute fuel, and this year I had close to $6,000.
Wow.
It's just, I did drive more.
Yeah.
But when you pay $1.80 versus $4,
Yeah,
it's more than doubled. So I actually drove my truck a lot more this year, which is not a good year for it, because it gets such horrible miles. But
And we're National Grid customers, and the kilowatt hour amount is increased
And what people don't
considerably
realize
as
is
well.
that
So-
electricity is made with fossil fuels
I know.
normally. I
Yep.
mean, we have solar, we have some wind farms,
But I would just say that those are two areas, and certainly holding us at 2.7% in general aid is not what the governor promised, and not potentially what will happen at the House and the Senate.
Well, in the House, it stayed the same.
It
but
did.
Hopefully
No,
in the Senate.
The Senate's where we can usually make a little headway.
I've made my position on that note.
yeah. I've tried to talk to at least Representative Berthew, and I haven't tried to talk to Senator Goby yet, but
Well,
when you look at the marijuana money the state is taking in,
more than alcohol taxes.
it's huge, the amount they're taking. And they give nothing back to communities that have allowed marijuana in the communities. It's not by no means is every town or city okayed marijuana use in any way. And the few that have, I'd like to see the Senate and the House work on giving some of the taxes they collect directly back to those communities. Granted, we can have 3% in a host agreement, but they're taking 21%. And there's no reason they shouldn't be able to give some of that aid back to the towns that are producing that money for them. And that's a real way they could help towns like this, you know, the amount of money they take from marijuana is huge, huge. And,
Well,
you know, if people talk to their reps and their senators, I'd say, hey, ask them to give money like that back to the communities where it comes from, just like
Well,
we want.
and when you do talk to Representative Berthium and others as well, and talk about rural schools. Quabbin Regional School District is considered a rural school, and there's allocation now of $4 million in there for rural school aid, which is additional to any other aid they get, and that is being supported and pushed forward by Senator Goby, Senator Hines, Senator Comerford, and others. So there's an area for us, because that's a budget that we really have to mitigate. Also, you
The
see.
transportation, that is
Transportation,
what hurts us. What
yeah.
the mandate without the funding it from the
Well,
state
we're
is
hope-
huge.
Yeah,
what
but
that does to the
hopefully
school
that
budget.
they're looking at potentially well at 95% reimbursement for regional transportation, which will help a lot.
Yes, it will.
So because that, you can imagine if there's not an fuel escalation clause in the contract, well, McCarthy's probably going out of business. But if there is, obviously, it's going to increase the cost of school transportation.
There could be a surcharge to all the
Yeah,
towns,
so
depending
that
on
will
the
be,
agreement
so
is.
anything that we can do to, and obviously I have an occasion to talk to Senator Goby a lot in my other job, so I think there's more money coming from the Senate than we'll see from the House, but we have some amendments in for schools in the House budget and on regional transportation, so there's some movement, we hope, in that.
I'll have to give him a phone call, see if he'll pick up.
Well, he's a vote we need, because it's always difficult for small communities to get the attention in the House, because we have so few representatives, because of our population, so, anyway, my hope is in the Senate more for rural schools than if you're not a city, it doesn't really make a difference for some of them.
Always nice to see what happens when the cherry sheet comes out and what we get. And it's
Sure
like,
is, yeah.
Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's like,
not.
oh, nuts. We're
Yeah,
back to
that's good.
cutting the budget because they didn't give us what we anticipated. Barrie Board of Selectmen Rules of Procedure, who put this in there?
I had added it because it's typical for boards to review their rules of procedure at their, first meeting when they welcome a new member.
Now, I will say this, I've been on for 5 years, this is the first time I've seen this in writing. And as pleasantly surprised reading through it, it is pretty much exactly how we proceed.
Yeah, it's pretty straighthtforward.
The only
There's
thing,
a little thing.
of course, that will stand out to some people is the public comment period. Well, we had this discussion back when it was Selectman Urban and Selectman Chase and I, because they were going on for inordinate amounts of time discussing things with people. It says the chair can extend that at their discretion, but they were going, what, Sandy, 20, 30 minutes, 40 minutes?
40 minutes.
On discussions, which and to get back to why my feeling in my, as long as I'm sitting in chair, has been keep it to a minute. I can get, we'll look at the clock now. I'm gonna take 1 minute. For someone to come in and bring a topic to us as this explains, to give us something in writing that we can post so the public can have some anticipation what's gonna happen here, is reasonable. And if someone can't come in 1 minute and express a concern without needing a lot of back and forth dialogue, the way it's written at 5 minutes, I can give them a minute. Each board member can then have up to a minute to respond, and we can give them a final minute to make up the 5. And I look at it that way and spend 5 on a topic. But no one should need 5 minutes to simply tell us some point that they want to bring to our attention that's not on our agenda. And if it needs 5 minutes, then my goodness, give us something in writing and let us post it for the public. I still have 10 seconds to go, and I haven't wasted a minute rambling about this, and I've gone on circles about this. And I have 5 seconds left. I think it's more than enough time to make a point in 1 minute. Done. Minute.
Well, sometimes. I think what happens is sometimes people come in here with, they're angry about something, they felt that they haven't been heard before, and sometimes it's very difficult to hold them to 1 minute. And when you put 1 minute, it really says, we really don't want to hear anything from you.
No, see, and this is why I explain it this way.
Well, okay,
It's not reasonable for other people, if someone's sitting like, wait a minute, I would have been in for that. I mean, if someone's got something it's not hard to
well, I think.
give a couple documents to the office.
Well,
and
you mean
ask
to try to
them.
get on the agenda.
We put it on the agenda.
I agree, but if the members of the public, and there's not a lot of people who ever show up anyway.
Right.
And I would, you and I have, amicably agreed to disagree regarding,
Right. Certain things.
the 1 minute. Well, no, I just know when people come in and they want to be heard because they're irritated about something, sometimes giving them 3 minutes saves a lot of aggravation than fighting and having the police come and remove them from meetings because they took
But-
more than 1 minute.
The board is here to conduct town business.
I agree.
And the things we need to do. So if somebody has a legitimate point about town business, that's one thing, but usually the complaints from the individuals we're talking about, they go quite off topic, and they're personal insults, and they're just grievances about all sorts of things and ideas of what they might like to do with it. Hey, literally, put a soapbox in the common and see who wants to come listen. They can spend an hour in the common
Well,
and talk all they want, but
Well-
to hijack the meeting and everybody at home for 2, 3, 4, or the one time, I think it was 20 minutes when we finally left the meeting to adjourn, to wait for them to leave, and had to wait about 20 more minutes.
well, that was not our finest moment.
No, but it is in here as 5 minutes, and the way I tend to use the 5 is I give them a minute, which should be enough, and then we do allow back and forth, and we've typically gone on for well over a minute to have some discussion. But trying to keep those engagements to a minute means we're not getting too deep into a topic without putting on the agenda.
Well, I think that what would be helpful for the public to understand then is that we clearly say that the public comment period is something that's very restricted. And if you have something that would require, a board attention or potentially board action, you need to get it on the agenda. And the process for that is blah, 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 blah.
That's in here.
Okay, but then.
That's what I'm saying, that is in here.
Yeah, so,
Already, so
but what we can't do is, every time someone comes and says they would like to make a comment, saying, well, we're not gonna hear them, because I know there's some people that are difficult at times. And sometimes we make them more difficult because we get into yelling and screaming matches of over 1 minute or 2 minutes. So I understand what we're trying to accomplish. My concern just is that we have an obligation to hear from the public. And I would like to, if we're going to have a public comment period, it's not required, I don't think.
Right, we have an obligation only because former boards have made these rules. We can vote to throw this out and not use it. So, or we can vote to abide by and continue. I think in general, the guidelines in here are exactly what we do. We do allow public comment on any topic. We don't stop people when we're on a topic from having a comment on it, but we limit how long they're going to be allowed to talk about something, because we have to have some decorum that we follow to keep these meetings from going too long. And only Sandy was here to really know in the past how long these meetings got. We would be here till what, regularly 10:30 at night?
I know, but was that because of public comment, or was that because of
Yes.
the board's jarring about a comment?
It was a combination of both.
Okay.
Public comment sometimes would
They went
last
into-
almost an hour.
You're right.
Well, I agree with
On one
you
topic
that-
with one person, and this is why I've gone, yes, it seems a little strict the other way, and I certainly never said, okay, it's a minute, shut up. I've let people go on, and, oh no, I've, even last time when Neil said it, I said, well, Neil, I've already given you 2.5, so I'm being good about it. And he wasn't making a point, he was just sort of rambling more and more. You can make your
Well,
point.
when you
And when he finally put it in writing, said, hey, I'd like a follow-up on this topic, we put it on the agenda and did it.
Well,
And-
when it says initial remarks will be limited to 5 minutes per person or total?
Well, there you go. We've moved it to 15 minutes total, and I would, I would say we can change, how about we change to 2 minutes per person and 15 minutes total? Because that's where we're at, is 15-minute periods, what I usually put in there.
Yeah, well, I would, that would certainly make an effort to demonstrate our,
It gives an additional minute. And I think, once again,
we need to just make them understand that.
2 minutes is a.
It doesn't mean that the board won't hear it in a more formal fashion if you want to place something on the agenda. But, setting the agenda, you don't want a bunch of drivel on there if you, so.
Well, and
so
also
that
setting the
becomes-
agenda is very clear that, Jessica's supposed to put the agenda together. Bless you.
Sorry.
Any board member that asks for anything on the agenda is to be placed on the agenda. And anything the public brings in, she runs it by the chairman.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
So that way.
And the one thing we haven't done
It's just-
is
it's just-
before the agenda
Allergies.
posts, it's supposed to be shown to the chairman for final approval, and I can adjust it. Which we've never done that, and I don't think we have to do that. I've just, when I asked Jessica to put things on, I like them to go on. And if we have something, when someone calls up, I would say, if somebody calls in, a citizen calls in and gives you information to put on the agenda, it's still the chairman's decision, whoever it be at the time, whether or not you want to entertain that on that night, or put it to a different night, or if it's just not relevant to town business.
I think we understand that. My only concern is, it's just that our public comment period at times has been a source of, a source of concern. And I realize that that is not a one-sided problem. I mean, the couple individuals who, sometimes come and want to take 15 or 20 minutes, I understand that's a problem. And I just want to make sure that we're fair and equitable, and that we don't make our limits so extreme that people go, well, what's that? And I, while I know sometimes public comment can be at the end of the meeting, and so forth, it used to be in the beginning of the meeting.
Right, and you know why I moved it.
I do know why you moved
And we
it.
can move it, we can put it, if you'd like, I have no problem putting it back in the beginning. We haven't been having the issues, we can move it back to the beginning of the meeting again.
Well, I know that what
That
we,
lets people come in and get
Right.
their voice heard without waiting the whole night. And we can certainly go back. It was better at the beginning of the meeting. I prefer the beginning of the meeting. It was necessary to move it so that if things got out of hand, we could adjourn the meeting and get away from the 40-minute break like we had before that.
and I don't have a problem. I know that you can't get here till, 6:30 or whatever, but if we had it from 6:30 till 6:45 is the public comment period, and we're here. And then,
Generally, that would be the.
we open the meeting and that's it. And then, once that 15 minutes is over, we're in the meeting.
Right, and if there is no public comment, we move
Well,
on
yeah,
beforehand.
yeah.
But we will live up to 15-minute block for public
Yeah.
comment. And part of that is, if you do have a lot of people that want to speak, then you're going to have to keep it down to a minute to make
I
sure everybody
agree,
gets to
I
get
agree.
heard.
That's seldom the
But-
case, fortunately.
But I would be open to moving that 5 minutes to 2 with, the
15 is a
15-minute
max.
cap. What do you think?
I think it, 5 might be excessive. 1, I do think is too short, with some people may just need that additional time to get their point across. I'm open to 2 or 3 in that range.
Right.
15-minute total, I think sounds good, and I'm up for moving it to the beginning.
All right, so I'll make a motion that we adjust it to 2 minutes per person with a 15-minute total, and it move back to the beginning of our agenda.
I'll second that.
So a motion is second to adjust it to 2 minutes per person, keep it at 15 minutes, and move it back to the beginning of the agenda. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
I,
Aye. All right, so that's the only amendment. You have that? It's the only amendment we'll make. I like most of the things in here. They're pretty clear. We've done a pretty good job just from me learning from, I've only learned from the years of being behind Charlie and Matt, how we do things, and they're doing things, you know, really right according to procedure, which is nice to see. You know, this is, once again, it is a policy set by the board. We're not obligated to follow it, but we'd like to. We've had that discussion in the past with the town's policy of 2-week internal hiring process. Other boards went away from that. You know, before I was selected, there was a lot of complaints from people in town that didn't have the opportunity internally first before they outsourced. And I think it's important to tell people if they work for the town that they have some room to grow, and try to advertise internally. That's why I've reached back to that policy whenever I can. So I like our policies, and I like to follow them when we can, so it makes more sense to me adjusting this rather than going off policy a little bit, which we're not far off, but, you know, and bearing in mind, although we're saying we're gonna have these public comment in the beginning, if something happens and I think it's smarter to move it to the back again, I would do it, or anyone who's chair can do that. It doesn't restrict you. You still have the right as chair
no, I
to
agree,
move.
because sometimes we're gonna go into executive session with the attorney,
We have
because that's
people
when the
waiting,
attorney has
right.
to come. I certainly.
There's
agree
times
with
when
that.
someone's here, if we've got people lined up waiting, especially if our attorney's here, whatever, $100 an hour, we're paying her to sit here, we want to get her out the door quickly, and not be in here too long. Anything else on that before we move on? So before we'll do these, we'll follow in order, reorganization of the board time.
So typically, this is like the last thing on the agenda, I would say probably before executive session. I included it in new business because it is new business, but I would recommend that we go through the meeting minutes and all of the reports and public comment
Okay. And
before we hit that.
I would point out that in the policy we just approved, it says it's the first thing on the meeting agenda.
Which is strange, and I would recommend
It's
changing
it's
that.
disruptive because
Because,
you
yeah.
switch seats around and stuff. So that's, if you want, we could open that back up and move that and do it at the end of the meeting again as well.
Yeah, I would recommend
It allows
that.
for continuity.
So we're gonna change this for that?
We might also want to change, it says I believe it said
The first Monday.
Monday, yeah, where there's already.
Or the first
where
meeting of
Should be the
April.
first
So
meeting
it
of
should be
it.
the first after an
After
election.
the election.
Yeah, I thought it did say the election, no?
No, it says first meeting in April.
Yeah. So,
So technically, it should have happened already.
right, which.
Before we knew who was
Before we knew,
selected.
right. So we're gonna have to modify that to say
Yeah,
the
first
first
Monday.
board meeting after the annual town election. And the time when I started late, and that's why I went into the second year, I started late because we didn't have the town election till, what was it, July or something? We held it off from COVID.
Oh,
They
okay.
didn't
What
have
was
the
the
meeting,
town
and
meeting?
they didn't have the election either. They pushed the election off.
Oh,
I thought we had the
So
election.
everything got pushed off, so we didn't have a new board, so
Okay.
we didn't do anything. And that was when I had to get reelected that year. It might have just been a month or two late, but it was late. And then we never did it in April, and it didn't get done until, I don't know, September or something silly.
So would it be more prudent then to have it at the first regularly scheduled Board of Selectmen meeting after any change to the board?
No.
No.
Okay.
After the
'cause
town election.
What the board has typically done in the past, and we got mixed up with Charlie, Matt, and I in those couple of years and the COVID and stuff, is you typically did, the new member of the board was the clerk, the person in the second year was the vice chair, and the person in the last year was chairman, and that gave a natural rotation, so you rotate through, and it gives you 2 years to learn before you sit in the chair. I wanted to do it early when I was on, but I wasn't ready. I know I wasn't ready now that I'd done it.
I'm just trying to think ahead if there's ever, say, a chair
Right.
that resigns, someone else is appointed to it, you need to reorganize at that point.
You have to reorganize when you get a new member because we've lost. Right now, technically, we have no vice chair,
Yeah.
technically. So that's why we have to do it. But the other thing is to, share the positions. I don't think it's, I don't know, some people probably like to say, I'm chairman of the board, and it doesn't really do much for you. It means you approve the, well, no, but I mean, in the past, I've seen, when I first got the chairman position, I had 2 or 3 people ask me to sign things on behalf of the board.
Wish you could.
And I said, I can't do that. Then it's like, well, we never heard these come before. I wonder where other people do. I don't know if they were or not, but I'm like, wow, you can't. So really, the chairman doesn't have any special powers except for certain things you have to sign, like when it comes down to the pay authorizations, and, you know, that's always fun in the new year. And run the meetings. It's really supposed to be equal for everybody, and I don't know why anyone would treat it differently, but that's it. So the experience is good. Gets people better at public speaking and trying to organize. I try to make sure that you both have plenty of time to speak. You know, every now and then we get off topic, someone has to go, okay,
Well,
we're gonna come
well,
back in, but.
Like you pointed out, it really has always been just a rotating assignment.
Right.
As the clerk is in a rotating assignment, and the vice chair is a rotating assignment. And so,
And it's not in the policy, which, once again, we could place that in the
Yeah.
policy, but it doesn't mean anyone has to stick to it. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's
wanna
necessary to
do
put
it.
it in the policy in case someone doesn't want to.
Well, they don't
want
have
to
to-
take that position.
because I know
Right.
I
Dylan
think
didn't
that's
want to take the
fine.
position.
Right, Dylan didn't want the position,
Yeah.
so,
No, I just meant, instead of saying post-election, anytime there's a new appointment, anytime there's a new person on the board, if it should be reorganized at that point, to cover those, which in theory would only be once a year after an election,
right.
but circumstances happen.
Yep.
They do happen, so maybe we should write it to say that the board shall be reorganized at the first meeting
After the town election.
after town election, or
Yeah.
when any member has been replaced.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So if someone steps out, or someone is recalled,
Effectively,
Um,
anytime there's a new board
once as a new
composition.
member, you need to, and even before that, but in bearing in mind, the board at any day, any time can say, you could say, I want to reorganize the board, and she can say, second, and we reorganize the board at any time. It doesn't have to, this is just prescribing a time that we must do it.
Right.
It is allowed anytime, and there's certain rules that everyone has to understand, and you know, that should be one of them. So to that end, we will finish executive session in things, and then we'll reorganize afterwards. Sound good? There are minutes? So we'll look for approval of, what do we have?
Approval of the April 4th meeting minutes. I believe, Greg, you have added, I don't know if it was left off by accident, in the executive session, members present.
Oh,
Clark,
that was,
Marcia,
Sandy's
Sullivan?
already fixed
I already
that.
fixed
You already
it.
picked,
Okay.
okay, just.
She was just copying from the fire chief's contract.
Okay.
Right, so so we have April 4th, open meeting you're going to make the motion for first?
Yes. We approve the minutes for April 4th, 2022 as presented.
I couldn't
And-
abstain.
Yeah, I will second that. We have motion and second to approve the April 4th open and, to approve and release
Right.
the open meeting minutes for April 4th. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for vote. All those in favor?
I,
Aye,
Abstain.
okay. And then we're going to do the executive session from April 4th.
there are 2 executive sessions noted here, the April 4th, 2022 executive session relative to fire chief, and April 4th, 2022 executive session relative to police chief. This is interesting because I know you don't want to vote on the first executive session.
Well, I
on
don't-
fire
I-
chief.
He wasn't.
No, I can't, we can approve the release of them. It takes 2 of us to approve the
Yeah.
minutes, so someone's going to have to vote to release them. Well, not to release, pardon me, but to approve them.
Right.
So we rely on the accuracy from the member that was there. And of course, I don't know if you know how we do it, Sandy will record and go through and take very good notes. And usually these are very, very, very accurate, and rarely make any changes.
I would recommend the approval of the April 4th, 2022 executive session relative to the fire chief as presented, not for release.
So I'd second that.
Yeah, you can second that one if you'd like. We have motion and second to approve the executive session over the fire chief's contract. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
I,
and I will abstain because I stay out of fire department issues because I'm still on. I'm debating about stepping down from that for a while for this because I don't make things, but
And then
I
I
still
would
probably will abstain even when I do
yeah,
that.
move approval of the April 4th, 2022 executive session relative to the police chief.
And I will second that. We have motion second to approve but not release the executive session for the police chief negotiations. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
I,
Aye.
Abstain.
Okay, and
under old business, if I could just,
I'm gonna say, wait.
just note the work that is happening in our finance division on moving to the new software, unifying all of those nuts and bolts. That is ongoing, and our folks are working very hard to make that happen. And I think it all looks good for a rollover in July as we've planned, as well as a closing of the, I hope, FY '22 in a timely fashion this year. That will be new for us, so that's good. So we're happy about that.
Apologize, I didn't mean to skip over that.
Yeah. Well, no, I just want to make sure that Jessica...
When we're discussing old business, I do want to take a moment to go back to the
Where are you?
This is old business.
Old
old
business.
business.
I just,
Let's talk about
we
business.
just went back right before the approval.
Right before the minute approval, I skipped old business, so we're getting it now.
I just wanted to, thank
Right.
those individuals who are working very
I
hard
want
to
to
make
take
that
a
happen.
minute to talk about the meeting with the school committee and the joint select boards. It just happened the last 2 meetings. Unfortunately, my phone died about an hour into the meeting.
Well, they reached me, so there was another person on.
Well, I saw you were both there at the
Yeah.
meeting that day, so we were both there.
Yeah.
And I was logged in, I just was on my phone because I was out and about. And my concern that I brought up at the prior meeting hasn't changed. We talked about, I know they wanted to close the school before, but closing the school requires an approval vote from the town that was, and all that sort. So they've been moving students out, as I believe you've heard, and they want to move K through 6 completely out. And my concern was that it's a violation of the regional agreement, and I still believe it is. And I sent a message in to Cheryl, which I don't know if it got shared because my phone died shortly afterwards.
It got shared.
Both the federal and state defined grade school, the elementary, as K through 6. Pre-K does not fit the definition, it does not honor the agreement, and especially where pre-K is elective and selective. Both people can say, yes, I'd like little Johnny to go, or no, we're not going, and then the school can say, well, we're taking Mary, but not Johnny. I really think it's violating the spirit of that regional agreement, and I gotta believe, without looking at the whole agreement and reading it, it's gotta be in there for a reason. And I'm concerned that if they move that elementary out fully, without the boards making some sort of formal expression of concern that this is violating the agreement, I would believe once we've allowed them to move them out, that they can say next year, hey, we're gonna close that school because there's no elementary there.
Well, I disagree, and I disagree because in order for the people to have talked with the MSBA to ensure that that will be considered a school, looking at our regional agreement and making that move and adjustment, because the big issue in New Braintree is all about, not where the kid, because the parents all say, please put them together. It was about their roof, that they will not be able to apply for a school construction grant.
Right.
And the district, from what I understand.
I'm not challenging it being a school. I understand as long as they keep it for some sort of education purposes in the town of Groton, I know this. They took an old elementary school, which my father went to high school there. They used it as an admin building. It was still a school, and they could do functions and do things in it. Once they pulled that out of the building, it was no longer a school. And my concern is if they decide they're not going to have a presence in the school, the towns would have no say because the elementary's already gone.
Well, I disagree with you about that. I think, trust me, if it were that easy, probably would have been done years ago. It's not.
Well, but I want to express
because-
my concern about
well,
it.
I
understand it is still a school as long as they do anything with it. And
No,
by
no,
having,
if they would-
anything educationally.
Anything with children in it,
So,
or
doing
pupils.
doing this extended education
Yeah.
program for people 18 to 22 does meet the state's definition for school, and having pre-K is defined, it's still educational, so they're
Yep.
doing educational, and I understand that absolutely keeps it as a school, but my concern is, the regional agreement says elementary, and they need approval to move all the elementary out. And strictly not looking at what the parents want, or the citizens that aren't parents want, or the school committee wants, looking at, and you've both heard this from me many times, what is legal and right. I don't think it follows the spirit of the agreement if we pull all the elementary defined
Knowing the
grades out.
agreement, I bet, better than you, you're wrong. I mean, it's just as simple as that. In the old days, you understand that preschools are mandatory in our school district. They're required. And they're required, and they're called what we call collaborative preschools. They're required in schools because you must take kids from ages 2.7, okay, until till their 23rd birthday because of special education. You can't have an unintegrated classroom. Like, you can't put preschool kids with just special needs in the building and say, that's a preschool. You can't. You must have what they call other individual students that are not on educational programming. So you have to have a preschool. If you've got 7 or 8 students who may have preschool needs, they have speech therapy, you have to have what they call the students who are not eligible for special ed in those classrooms. So it is not as you've described it. These are classrooms, these are required by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and special ed laws under the federal guidelines. There is no way you can just say, oh, we're not taking you, we're not taking you, especially now that they have preschools in every single building in the district. That's unusual. And the big issue always was that the New Braintree people complained because they had to travel so far to get to a preschool, of which you can understand. So now they would have a preschool, and there would be other kids in there because the only student eligible for kindergarten in New Braintree next year is 1. They just can't populate the building to meet the educational needs of the children without moving kids from other towns to New Braintree, which is what they're
Are
going
you
to do.
denying the definition of elementary as K through 6?
Absolutely,
Okay, so you think pre-K is within the definition of elementary?
absolutely.
I mean, I understand the requirements.
Yeah,
There's a lot of different definitions depending on who you're looking at. I know, just in my own experience, Mass DOT will take, anything 8th grade and below as elementary for the sake of zoning for a school zone. So I think my concern then would be who views it as what, and which of those views could hurt us if we do this.
Yeah. Well, that's why there was all sorts of, the Mass School Building Authority was, they said to them, okay, here's what this school will include. You consider this school? And they said, of course it's a school. It's because it has mandatory
Right,
programming in
And I
it.
don't doubt that.
Because all New Braintree is concerned about is not how many children are in their building. What they're concerned about is it a school so that in 3 or 4 years when they need a roof, that they're going to be able to apply for Mass Building Authority grants, and they will, and it has been, certainly Jack McCarthy from SBAB has said, yeah, of course it's a school. It's housing what we call mandatory public education.
Okay.
It's mandatory public education. Now, there's no question that the number or the amount of square footage we have in our district, and you know this, we have too much, okay, and
We could shut 3 elementary schools and house all the kids, there's no doubt.
well,
Nobody would.
no,
Nobody.
not that.
We were pretty close.
No.
We were pretty close.
Okay, but since
You
they've
could close
moved,
2.
since they've moved the 6th grade to the middle high school,
Well, then might be
okay?
back up to-
So, and they had to do that in order to get the kids enough space.
For the
under
for the K
COVID.
through 5 under COVID, which was
Okay,
great.
and so
I said
now
that.
the middle school is grades 6, 7, and 8, which is kind of a traditional situation. But what you have now is you have the middle high school building kind of maxed out, which now really kind of sabotages any idea we had or they had for Chapter 74 funding, which gives you vocational opportunities. So I'm sure you're going to see more schmoozing of where the kids are in order to get the best bang for the public
Last time we
spot.
discussed, we talked about other different ways to try to bring things in. That's why I brought up the agriculture. I know we
Yeah.
have some kids that do agriculture, and we have to
Oh.
very expensively ship them out for agriculture.
To Smith Voc or
Jeez,
to
why not get
Walpole.
a room for agriculture education over there? And
Well, the problem is because it's Smith Vocational Technical School, which is where our kids, if they usually are going to go into agricultural studies, is where they deal with what they call large animal / agricultural. And that be, they have all kinds of equipment the kids learn to fix and ride and do. And Walpole, where some of our kids go, which is another trek, believe me,
Oh, yeah.
that is for small kind of animals. So that's where your dog groomers come from, your vet tech people maybe. Now, of course, Monty Tech has put in a vet tech program, but of course, they're very limited on the number of kids they take from each of the member towns. But at any rate, education is changing because there's more emphasis on trying to get people in the trades. And now you've got Monty Tech, who sends, 50% of its kids off to college, and everybody's going, what? And they're not welders, and they're not plumbers, and
Well, that's
so-
the other side of it, though.
so people are complaining about that. You can't win but for losing, because they try to say, well, we're going to offer more advanced placement and so forth, and then everybody's going, well, wait a minute.
Over the years, I had a lot of folks want me to give their kids a summer job. Not so they learn to be a painter, so they want to go to college. And I think the
I hear
same
you.
thing might happen. All right,
Well,
I don't want to
anyway,
go on
yeah,
anymore, but
okay.
I just want to bring it up. That was my red flag to it. I'm glad it was discussed, because I didn't.
And it was discussed.
I didn't
It was
get to hear
discussed.
it, but I'm glad it was discussed, and that's why I want to make sure it was heard, and I'm not going to get into it anymore, but that was my concern. And when I was looking up the definitions, I'm like, ooh, you're going to get into hot water here, and I don't want that. Okay. No correspondence this week, correct?
Correct.
Other than we had the hearing already. Any special select board reports otherwise? Town administrator report?
Thank you. So I wanted to start off by mentioning that Senator Brewer approached our office last week, and he wanted the board to have a Vietnam memorial update. So the senator, retired senator, has taken the reins of this Vietnam memorial project. I know that Greg and Maureen know the project, but John, to get you up to speed, there is a Vietnam memorial in the center of town here, in North Common, and it is not up to date with all of the names of Vietnam vets that served who lived in Barrie.
There's some plethora of reasons for that, too.
Yes,
Yes,
there-
we won't get into those
Right,
details
there's a
'cause
plethora of reasons,
we're
but that's
looking
missing.
forward, and we're, making sure that all of the names that need to be on there are on there. And so the senator has taken it upon himself to work with a granite company and make sure that those, I think it's about 10 or 13 names.
I think it's 12, actually, 12.
Okay, somewhere in there.
And I know that he asked me yesterday to co-sign, because they needed 2 signatures to approve the name, so the people wouldn't do the, engraving, so
Yep.
that's done.
Okay, so we have that all set, and it is going to be funded by the Barrie Charitable Savings Foundation. And so I think that this has been a project that's been long in the works, and hopefully we will see that come to fruition very soon.
Well, they're hoping by Memorial Day, which would be nice.
That would
Really?
be
That would be
wonderful.
quick.
Yeah. So that was a good positive update that I had. Other than that, over the past couple of weeks, I've been able to take advantage of some in-person training and meetings. I went to an injured on duty training in North.
Oh, injured on duty, okay.
Injured on duty on training in Northampton. And that was a day-long workshop where I met with our insurance company, along with a lot of the area town administrators, police chief, fire chiefs, HR directors, and so on and so forth. And we kind of went through the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of what it's like to deal with when a police officer or a firefighter gets hurt on the job. And that is separate. They are not covered by workers' comp insurance, but they are covered by this other section of Mass General Law that gives them a separate kind of line of protections, and it can get very complex and in the weeds. So I'm glad that I took advantage of that training. I learned a lot. You know, luckily, we don't have a lot of injured on duty claims, but they do happen every once in a while. So it's good to have that kind of training. And then I also went to an MMA conference, and I went to a series of workshops that included how communities can use ARPA funds, how to kind of keep track of what you're spending, where you're spending it, and how you kind of manage requests from different departments. So I met with somebody from the city of Holyoke. Obviously, they have, I think it was $40 million in ARPA funds, so they needed a little bit more of a strategic operation. But I'm working with her to get some resources that she mentioned that I think would be really helpful for us to kind of guide us as we move into our responsibility of using the ARPA funds. And I did send out a request to all of the departments to share their needs with the ARPA funds, and I have about $2.2 million in requests. Obviously, we only have $1.6 million in funding, but it does, like, I wanted to also use this as an opportunity to highlight some of the needs that we have in our facilities, because a lot of these, well, some of them are related to the fire department's apparatus, but then a lot of the requests also have to do with some of our facility needs at the public safety building, in this building, and at the library. So I'm still compiling responses from departments on that, and then I'm going to make a community survey as well to kind of get a temperature on what the community would like to see the board invest the money in. And then the goal will be to have a public meeting. I'm hoping next month we can do a special meeting aside from our normal select board meetings where we just talk about ARPA investments and bring in, you know, some community members for them to kind of advocate for what they want, or better understand what our departments are asking for as well. And I have requested the assistance of our folks from Capital Strategic Solutions to kind of help us moderate that discussion and keep us on track, so we're not here till 10:30 at night. And other than that, we're grinding away at the budget, town meetings in a couple of months, and carrying on with the normal business.
Excellent, thank you. We do have executive session to get to, public comment.
Well,
Sam, you out there still?
No, he left.
Yeah, poked his
I
head
hear
back
somebody, I
in.
thought. He came back, but then he left again. Okay, I guess
All
we
right.
can move on.
So we can move to executive session. Mass General Law, Chapter 30, Section 21A, to conduct strategy in preparation for negotiation with non-union personnel, specifically the police chief. I'm making that motion to go to executive session.
Marshall, the second?
A motion to second to go into executive session. We will come out only to reorganize the board and possibly public comment if anybody does appear for it. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I need a roll call vote, please.
Marshall, yes?
O'Sullivan, yes?
Dixon, yes?
Thank you.